GB News can reveal that Sir Keir Starmer ignored a Rotherham whistleblower's bullying complaint after she exposed child abuse and corruption while he was leader of the opposition in 2020.
Well, let's talk then to our National and Investigations reporter, Charlie Peters. Tell us more, Charlie, about this.
Well, her name is Jane Senior. She was the whistleblower who exposed the scandal in Rotherham. She worked with a reporter from The Times called Andrew Norfolk to expose an appalling travesty in that South Yorkshire town, with a report released in 2014 showing that some 1,400 children, at a conservative estimate, had been sexually exploited and abused by gangs of predominantly Pakistani men in Rotherham from 1997 to 2013. And very soon after this scandal broke, there was another report which exposed the incompetence of Rotherham Council at the time, and indeed measures that they took to cover up this scandal. Now, because Jane exposed all of this, she also wanted to help fix it, and so she became a Labour councillor. This is a position she resigned eventually in March 2021 due to what she describes as a political witch hunt and bullying, the feeling of being sidelined and extensive hostility towards her, she says, because she exposed the scandal in the town. Now, we were able to reveal yesterday that a letter was sent to Sir Keir Starmer's office when he was leader of the opposition, urging Sir Keir to meet with Jane Senior, who at that point was both a Labour councillor but also broadly considered a bit of a national hero. She was given an MBE by the Queen in 2016 because of the work she did working with survivors of abuse to reveal what had taken place in Rotherham, sparking so many reports, sparking so much investigation. But he ignored this letter which said that she was facing appalling bullying, that she was being sidelined and she needed support to explain the situation. We've seen correspondence sent by Sir Keir Starmer's office that simply says, unfortunately, we won't be able to facilitate a meeting. Oh, but here is an online form for processing complaints. Now, some who might defend the now Prime Minister on this case could point to the fact that if there are complaints in the Labour Party, then they do need to be put through this sort of online form process. But fundamentally, I think what we've seen as a political reaction to this story, with both Kemi Badenoch from the Conservatives and Rupert Lowe from Reform and plenty of other commentators as well, they're all saying that, well, Jane Senior did have that national hero status. She was being bullied. Why didn't you take the time to meet with her, especially considering the reputation and fear that people had around the Labour Party and the CSE scandal and all the cover-ups? Many people have said that they have just snubbed Jane Senior at her time of need, and she walked away from politics soon after.
I mean, what is interesting in all this, of course, is it adds to the current situation where the government is being accused of trying to sweep all of this under the carpet by not wanting a full public inquiry. Kemi Badenoch's written in the Mail, hasn't she, today, saying it's time there was one. And again, almost just pushing aside the complaint, saying, well, the Conservatives had 14 years to do this and you didn't. She's saying, well, it's a new party now with a new person in charge and we've got to take this seriously.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary discussion that's taken place this week since GB News revealed on Wednesday that Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, had rejected calls for a government-led inquiry into Oldham. We revealed that the letter was sent in October, well over 3 months after Oldham asked for this review. That then led to Kemi Badenoch calling for this national inquiry after Elon Musk shared the reporting by GB News, which generated quite an international conversation about this issue. Now, Kemi Badenoch, in calling for that public inquiry and the criticism they've received over what they did in 14 years, a lot of it very justified. A lot of survivors that I've spoken to over the years were not impressed by the general approach by the Conservatives. But towards the end of those 14 years, there was some action. They did commission an independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, but it lost sight of its target. It didn't look into grooming gangs. It didn't report from any towns where there were credible reports of that kind of on-street child abuse gang operating. It also only mentioned Rotherham once in 400 pages. So a lot of people say that report was insufficient. We need a public inquiry that focuses very intensely and solely on this grooming gangs crisis, because we've found up to 50 different towns and cities where this has been going on, but we've never had a national investigation, a national inquiry to reveal all of those problems. They will also point to the fact that in 2023, after a GB News investigation, the government launched a grooming gangs task force. And if people are concerned that this problem isn't still going on, that task force made over 500 arrests in its first year and protected some 4,000 victims. A lot of people point to that task force and say, clearly, we need to learn from history, but we also need to start acting more now.
Yeah, but that's the problem with this, isn't it? We tend to, as a nation at least, we've viewed this as a historic issue which was resolved in court in a number of locations. But clearly it is ongoing and of current concern.
Yeah, Stephen, and it's a national atrocity that some people think occurred in the past and is now done. It's not the case. It's absolutely not the case. This sort of child abuse, times have changed, technology has changed, a lot of it happens online now, appalling amounts of online abuse. But on-street grooming and assaults by gangs are still very common, and the task force has shown in its first year, just through that number of arrests and the actions it's taking, being led by the National Crime Agency, that this is an ongoing crisis. Another thing that survivors point to when you speak to them about their demand for a national inquiry is that they've only had 4 localised reports. You've had Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, and that small review in Oldham. Now, some of those reports were very good, some of them were not. But they say we can't go over years and years of fighting for just local reports and local reviews. We need to capture all of this urgently with great resources and police action. And further, we need to ensure that public officials who failed are held to account, because all too often there have been cover-ups, people have failed enormously, people have told investigators to look the other way due to fears of racism. And that has led to a situation where public sector officials have failed and then walked away with a pension or a brand new job. For a lot of survivors, that's an appalling kick in the teeth, and they want this national inquiry to finally change that crisis.
OK, Charlie, we'll leave it there, but I know you won't leave it there, which is terrific. Well done. Thank you very much indeed. We will have to read out, though, what the Labour Party, for instance, say in reply. They've said all complaints are treated seriously and thoroughly assessed in line with our rules and procedures. Complaints are assessed via a specific process independent of the Leader's office, and this was clearly signposted in response to this correspondence at the time.
Meanwhile, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has said in relation to Jess Phillips, as Safeguarding Minister, that Jess Phillips has dedicated her career to tackling sexual violence and abuse and to being a voice for victims and survivors of the most terrible crimes, including child sexual abuse. From setting up the first ever child sexual exploitation service in the Black Country and supporting survivors in Telford, Jess has been a fearless and formidable advocate for victims and survivors. She's worked with whistleblowers and campaigned tirelessly for justice for those badly let down by endemic institutional failure. And
saying and accepting that still makes it odd that she doesn't support she has said she can't support the call for a national inquiry. This is what it should be left to the local council.
This is what doesn't make any sense, because actually what Yvette Cooper says about Jess Phillips there is absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
Jess
right.
Jess Phillips has been marvellous in the things she's done, and yet she has turned round and
said we can't do this, which just goes against everything in that she's fought for so far as we can tell. Very odd. It's very odd.
Is it because when you're in government you have to toe the government line?
Yeah.
And even somebody as outspoken as Jess Phillips has, in this case, towed the government line. Oh.